Welcome to CPAC Now, America Uncanceled. My name is Mercedes Schlapp.
I'm Matt Schlapp.
It's great to be with you all. And our special guests today, KT McFarland and Russ, Vought, who will be joining us.
KT McFarland is an ACU board member, a CPAC all-star, a freedom warrior and champion who is one of these important people that's the bridge between the Reagan policies and the Trump policies, and she knows more about what's going on around the globe than anyone. KT, thanks for joining us again on CPAC Now.
Pleasure and an honor.
And you're obviously going to be with us in Dallas for CPAC July 9th through the 11th, but in the meantime, there's a lot of international news brewing. What's your take on Joe Biden's kind of first foray into the international diplomatic world?
Well, it wasn't as bad as Vice President Harris's foray into the diplomatic world in Latin America. However, I think it was a big failure. Look, the lapdog media is going to say, oh, he's so great. There were communiques issued and the Europeans all slapped him on the back saying, you know, great to have you back in the club. But here's the reality. He had one job, and that was to rally the European countries behind him to stand up to China and Russia. And he failed. The meeting with Putin, I think, was the die was cast long before they walked into that room, because Biden was unable to get the Germans, for example, who want to sell their cars to the Chinese, and they want cheap energy from the Russians with the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. They're not standing up to China. They're not standing up to Russia. And the worry I have is, as you look forward, the Chinese and the Russians, they're getting together. And the combination of Chinese technology, Chinese money, Russian military wherewithal, and Russian natural resources, that's a pretty potent combination to stand up to for the United States. And it'll be very difficult for the United States to stand up to them alone. That's why it's of critical importance that Biden is able to gather our security allies, our trading partners, into a kind of a common approach so we stand up to the Russians and the Chinese together. And I don't think he got that.
Were you surprised that Putin and Biden did not do a press conference together?
Thank God they didn't. You know, here's the thing. Normally you do have a shoulder-to-shoulder press conference. Right. And I think it was very smart for Biden's people not to put them shoulder-to-shoulder. And it would have been great if they did go shoulder-to-shoulder and Putin could have said, spewed his lies, and Biden could have said, hey, wait a minute, you know, that's not quite right. But I don't think Biden was up to it. And so the worst of all worlds would have been if they had stood shoulder to shoulder and Putin was doing his propaganda routine and he was talking happy, and then Biden didn't do anything and let him get away with it. So I think it was probably, under the circumstances, the best that could happen. But it was sad to see. I mean, Joe Biden looked like a kindly but tired old man. And Putin, you know, who is a killer, who is a KGB expert, who absolutely knows how to play the press, I think he did a pretty robust job. And so if you're a country if you're a leader, if you're a country, if you're a company on the edge of trying to decide, you know, where's my future best positioned with the United States? Is the United States a declining world power, or is my future best served by joining forces with the Chinese and the Russians, who I don't like, mind you, and I know don't like me, but maybe it's time for me to make a deal and cut my deal while I can. And to me, and that's why CPAC is so important and what we do at CPAC, because we are standing up for things that I think a lot of American leadership no longer stands up for. And the world is trying to figure it out. We're at a tipping point in the world. You know, America is the 20th century was America's century. We were the great power. Everybody wanted to be like us. They wanted our political system. They wanted our economic system. They wanted our alliance system. And now, after the pandemic especially, but with the rise of China, the world is kind of reconsidering, well, maybe the Chinese did handle the pandemic better. Maybe the Russians do know how to keep domestic order. Maybe there's something to communism and authoritarian governments and state capitalism. And I think that's the important part that we have to stand up for, because I don't think we have a current administration that is standing up for it. And I think President Trump, as much as I adore him and love him and think he absolutely had the right policies, I don't think he was able to do what he needed to do, which is to gather the allies behind us.
No, I think that you're right about CPAC. I do think that one of our important parts of our mission is that when the world's looking at America and our government and even our CEOs of our companies, and they're all scratching their head like, why does America hate itself? It's really important for prominent Americans like yourself, KT, for us to go overseas and to kind of rekindle this idea that we have these values that are very important to grow your economy, that are very important to give human rights, to recognize the human rights of your people, and to stand up for what's good and true in the world. And we're doing that, and you're doing that, so it's awfully important. But I have to ask you this question: if you were a Ukrainian and you heard Joe Biden's answer on whether or not Ukraine should, be included in this, in kind of this community of nations, wouldn't you have wanted to hear from the American president that that we're going to stand up to aggression against the Ukraine? It was amazing how that wasn't a part of any answer. I'd be very worried if I was in the Ukraine.
Yeah, you sure would be, especially because what's happened in the last 3 or 4 months is the Russians have massed troops on the Ukrainian border, and they've also told American warships, which traditionally go to the Black Sea, do a circuit, sort of swim around, they sail around the Black Sea, and then they come out. Putin told them 2 months ago, don't you dare send American naval vessels into the Black Sea. And so what did we do? Well, we turned around and we didn't go into the Black Sea. So if you're Ukraine, you're sitting there thinking, wait, where are my friends? Where are my enemies? I'm now watching Germany, who's supposed to have my back, making separate deals with the Russians, and I'm getting pretty nervous.
Well, KT, you know this, former Deputy National Security Advisor to President Trump. Did Joe Biden whiff the answer? Or is that the Biden administration's answer? Basically, we're not really getting engaged on this question until maybe it's too late.
I think that, in fact, it's the latter. I think that this administration has decided that it's just not going to stand up to Russia, not going to stand up to China. I mean, they want to feel good about themselves, right? They want the Europeans to slap them on the back. They want to have happy talk, but they're not willing to do the tough stuff. The tough stuff right now would be to say, okay, I think the Ukrainian people have the right to their own self-determination, and the United States is going to continue to sell them advanced weaponry to defend themselves. And yet we didn't do that. Or the President of the United States should say, we're really worried about the encroachment and the Chinese and the Russians and going into the global commons with cyber attacks and cyber hacking. We're going to really increase American cyber defenses and even offensive capabilities. Or, for example, the President of the United States could have said, we're really concerned about the military buildup with Russia and China, and I'm going to reverse my position and I'm going to increase our defense spending. But in fact, he's not doing any of those things. And particularly with regard to Russia, the thing that is to me just the criminal action that he did. The Russians are an economy that doesn't work. All they do is they sell natural resources, oil and natural gas. And that's how they make their money. Nothing else. I mean, who buys Russian cars, right? Or who buys Russian wine? Nobody buys any of that stuff. It's Russian oil and natural gas are the only things that the world wants. And so what did Biden do? We had put a shutdown of the Russian pipeline that goes from Russia to Germany, carrying natural gas. And the Trump administration sanctioned the heck out of the Russians and the Germans to not allow that to happen, because knowing full well, if it's completed, Germany has cheap energy for sure, but they also have Russian thumb on top of their economy. The Russians will turn that pipeline on or off depending upon their political whims. The Russians will also now have an economic bailout. They're going to have windfall profits for decades to come because of that relationship. So to me, a lot of what should have happened in the lead up to this summit didn't happen. And that's why, what are you getting out of Joe Biden? A lot of platitudes, happy talk, but nobody's standing up to the Russians, and certainly nobody's standing up to the Chinese.
And KT, how ironic. So, President Biden makes this decision to oppose and stop the pipeline, the Keystone Pipeline here in the United States, thwarting our efforts on energy independence. Yet he waives the sanctions on the Russian-Germany pipeline, which I think is so disgraceful. But let's go back to this press conference. There's a moment where we know that the big question of President Biden calling Putin a killer. And I just want to play for you what President Biden, how he responded.
Steve Holland, Reuters.
President Putin said he was satisfied with the answer about your comment about him being a killer. Could you give us your side on this? What did you tell him?
He's satisfied. Why would I bring it up again?
And now that you've talked to him, do you believe you can trust him?
Look, this is not about trust. This is about self-interest and verification of self-interest. That's what it's about. So I virtually almost anyone that I would work out an agreement with that affected the American people's interest, I don't say, well, I trust you, no problem. Let's see what happens.
So KT, let me get your reaction. He goes from calling Putin a killer to all of a sudden softening his stance on Putin.
You know, I think he was right the first time. Putin is a killer. But you don't just have, and this is one of the, I guess, the big fundamental problem I have with all aspects of the Biden administration, is that it's a lot of talk, but there are no deeds to back up the talk. You know, Putin's a killer. Well, okay, so where's the American defense spending? Where's American cyber defense? Where's American cyber security? Where's the United States saying to the Russians, we are going into the Black Sea? Or, by the way, Russia, we know that those hackers are coming from Russian territory. We're going to do that back to you right in your face. There's no deeds that match the words. So whether it's saying that Biden's saying, I'm going to be a great healer, I'm going to, you know, fix America, I'm going to bring everybody back together, kumbaya. No, he's the most far left-wing president in American history. He's a socialist. And so deeds, words. I'd rather have Donald Trump, because Donald Trump said a lot of stuff, but if you looked at what he did, his policies were terrific. He knew how to fix the American economy and to put it into massive economic growth. He cut taxes. He fixed the unemployment problem overnight, and he made America energy independent. The energy independence thing is a really big deal because it's a triple win. By being energy independent, it fixes the American economy. It creates a lot of jobs, but it also makes American manufacturing that much more competitive on the world stage. So it's good for our economy. Second, it's a national security win because we have been tethered to the Middle East for decades because that's where we get our energy from. We've needed their oil. And so as a result of energy independence, not only is the United States no longer importing their oil, no longer dependent on the Middle East, we're exporting oil. I mean, we become the new Middle East. We become the wealthiest country because of our energy exports. And then finally, it was a win for the environment. You know, electricity isn't something that you get by plugging something into the wall. The wall doesn't have the electricity. The electricity needs to be generated someplace. So where is the electricity being generated? Well, in power plants. And because natural gas from fracking, natural gas all of a sudden became so cheap in the United States, American manufacturing companies, they switched from coal, from oil, and they switched to natural gas. As a result of that, you know, we were reducing our greenhouse gas emissions exponentially. So all of that stuff is great, right? Jobs, energy independence and foreign policy, Middle East independence, and cleaner environment. So what does Biden do? Shuts down the American fracking industry, shuts down the pipeline. Here we go again, sucked back into the Middle East.
Yeah, no, it's true. And, you know, some of these policies the consequences are so dire, including this international concern we have with the outbreak of Chinese corona. You've had a long time to study this, KT. You've probably talked to a lot of people with a lot of knowledge in our government and other governments. What's your best read on what happened with the creation and the outbreak of this virus? And do you think the Wuhan lab is the kind of the epicenter of all of it? Like, it seems so clear now.
Yeah, the Wuhan lab is a Chinese military lab, Chinese army. I mean, a year ago, more than a year, 15 months ago, I was at CPAC right before the pandemic really locked everything down.
Right.
And I did an interview with NPR, I think. And they said, well, what do you think about the coronavirus? I said, I think it's a lab leak. And I think they were experimenting with biological weapons. And I, of course, was called everything, conspiracy theorist, crazy person. Right. Well, now it looks like in fact, that's what it was. You know, why the heck is anybody doing this, what's called gain of function research, which is to take a virus that naturally occurs in nature and make it more contagious and more lethal? To me, that's like creating a biological weapon. That's Frankenstein monster stuff. So I think it did come from there, but I think we will also never find out. And when the European nations, with Biden's summit meetings with all of them, they're going to commission a new study, a really, a transparent study this time. We're going to go right back to the World Health Organization, which is China's sock puppet, and ask them to investigate the origins of it. But even all of that stuff aside, what bothers me the most about it was not how did it come about. It's once the Chinese realized how lethal it was and how contagious it was, they employed it as a biological weapon on the world. They shut down travel within China. They didn't let it spread within China, but they opened up and they encouraged Chinese travel from Wuhan to the rest of the world. They knew they were spreading that virus to the rest of the world, and they used that period of time while the world was trying to cope with it to corner the market on cures for it, on protective equipment, on testing equipment, and they used the time when the world economies are all struggling. They're going around the world and they're buying up natural resource companies and technology companies at fire sale prices. So it's what the Chinese knowingly did once they knew the lethality of the virus.
Unreal. KT, you've got a book coming out, Revolution, Trump, Washington, and We the People. Talk to us about the book.
It's a book that's selling like hotcakes, actually.
Yeah, it's all of a sudden, it's really doing very well on Amazon this week, I might point out. Look, it's got 3 parts. The first part is why I, a traditional Republican foreign policy establishment expert of 40 years of training, now 50 years, why I broke with the establishment to support Donald Trump and his policies, because I thought that American foreign policy we've been chasing the Middle East for 20 years, and we had lost track of the strategic threat presented by China. And I also talk about the economy and how when I was in the Reagan administration, it was a lot of these same policies: peace through strength, Reaganomics, which put the United States in an economically dominant and technologically dominant position for 20 years. So why I broke with the establishment to support Donald Trump and Donald Trump's policies. So the second part of the book, though, was my experiences in the Trump administration and with the Mueller investigation and the Russia hoax. That's less interesting today than it was a year or 2 ago. But the final part is the one I'm most proud of. And that's when I realized, after I left the Trump administration, I was so sort of frazzled that my husband and I went to the most remote part of the planet. We went to the west coast of Scotland and then even got on a boat and on a ferry and went to the more remote parts of it. And I thought about America and what's happening in America today. And I concluded that we are going through this cathartic creative destruction, which we go through every 40 or so years, where both political parties look at the leadership and say, you're not doing it for me. I want new people, new ideas. So for the Republicans and conservatives, we've gone in one direction. The Democrats, they've gone to the loony left, right? So they're embracing, critical race theory and socialism and all the other things. But I think at the end of this, America goes through these periods, and sometimes they're very disruptive, and they can last not 1 election cycle, but 1 or 2 election cycles, even 3. But we come out of it as a new nation, and I think that's what we're going through now. And that's why I look at the loony left, and they may be riding high right now, but I fast forward, where are we in about 24 months, maybe sooner? High inflation, very high unemployment, stagnant economy, very high interest rates, really high gasoline prices, pushed around by China, by Russia, by Iran, and probably even that little pipsqueak in North Korea. And so what is the country going to do? They're going to look at the standard bearer who brought all those policies upon America, and then by then it'll be Vice President Kamala Harris. And they're going to say, thank you very much. We've had enough of this. And I think that's why it's important for us, for conservatives like us, to continue to make our message strong, because the country's going to come around to us really soon. Before we know it, we're going to be back in charge.
Remember, there's a couple things to keep in mind. Number 1, we're having all the kids. So demographically, that should be helpful. Number 2, everybody who is living under socialism is fleeing it, both around the world and in this country. Manhattan, San Francisco, Chicago, people are fleeing those cities. They're not doing it because it's lovely. They're doing it because it causes human misery. So I feel as optimistic as you do, KT McFarland, and I think we're going to have a big year next year. But it all starts with CPAC in Dallas in July.
I'll be there. Will you guys be there?
We will be there. We'll be there.
Okay.
And
everybody else should be there too.
That's right. Go to our website at conservative.org, get your tickets, and we're going to be right back with a great guy, Russ Vought, who is President Trump's Director of the Office of Management and Budget, after this short break.
And now joining us is Russ Vought, former Trump OMB director and president of the Center for Renewing America. And I'd like to say one of my dear friends.
Yeah, and former colleague.
That's right. How are you, Russ? How's Mary?
She's doing great. It's great to be back on and see you all.
Yeah, it's good to be with you as well.
Thanks for joining us. There's been a lot going on. Actually, last week, your organization had something really common that happens to conservatives in terms of when big tech censors conservative groups. Can you walk us through what happened?
Sure. We put out a toolkit to help arm men and women school board activists across the country battle critical race theory or state-sanctioned racism. It's about soup to nuts encyclopedia of everything that they could possibly need to know. Soon thereafter, we got a hit job from Media Matters, and within a few hours, Twitter paused our accounts, and we were not able to use those to get the message out. They claimed it was their enforcement bots, and they unpaused the accounts the next day. Either way, if it was either intentional or it was their algorithms were set up to stifle our free speech to get something that was only factual, only impacting the debate. It's one of the reasons why we think that big tech needs to be significantly reformed, if not broken up.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question, Russ. There's some conservative division on philosophy and tactics with these companies. I guess my question to you is, how much abuse is too much until Republicans and conservatives will take no more of not regulating these guys more aggressively?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the reasons we exist, is to help provide intellectual capital to help those who are trying to reform big tech, because we think we're already past that line. When you have a former president of the United States who cannot use these platforms, and you have authoritarians across the world who can, you have a fundamental problem. And conservatives used to care about concentrated power even in the marketplace. It wasn't just concentrated power from our enemies across our oceans, but concentrated power anywhere as a threat. And you talk to many of the people who follow big tech closely, and they say, well, the problem's not with the leaders of these companies. I think the problem is with the leaders of the companies. It's just that they can't control their people. Well, that's the problem. That's one of the reasons what happens when you have these institutions that are too big. So we think that we definitely need to reform Section 230, the liability shield, but we also need to take a look at how to use the antitrust laws against them.
But let's be real, Russ. It looks like, although you've seen so many Republican senators, congressmen come out saying, yes, we need to break up big tech, it's probably going to go nowhere in Congress. So what can happen? Will it be through lawsuits more so that we can take action against the big tech companies?
I think it's multi-phased. I think the first part of it is to win the national debate, so that if there's conservatives who can take office, get a chance that we can get these things through Congress. And I do think there is some room on the antitrust side for bipartisan support. It'll be careful. We can't use it as an opportunity for Elizabeth Warren to do everything she's wanted to do to corporations. But I think there is a moment that we can get something done. But in the meantime, while we win the national debate, there's action being done at the state level to create red sanctuaries. Governor DeSantis legislated on this area. There's a similar bill moving in the state of Texas. These are really important things. And when you have big states like that, they can move these companies to change their business just by virtue of the fact of getting their attention in a state the size of Florida.
So you talked about intellectual capital, and something that when you were OMB director, you really got into the guts of government. You probably have more knowledge than anybody about what needs to be done to change the way our federal government operates. As you go around the country and talk to people, what's your take on what's going on there around the country? Do you sense great unease and people don't like all this socialism and fascism and authoritarianism that's coming out of the government? Or do you think we're still just hopelessly divided 50-50?
Yeah, I'm very encouraged what I see across the country with citizens, and I'm sure you are as well, all of the events that you all do. I've never seen men and women, citizens across the country, consider the cost and the consequences of standing for their country and being willing to be canceled for the greater good of being able to save their country. And we used to see people rise up and care about their healthcare premiums or their gun rights, and all of that. We'll be right there with them to fight on those issues till the end of time. But what I'm seeing now, guys, is that people know that they'll be called a bigot. They know that they'll be called a racist, and they're choosing to go to the microphones at a school board meeting already and knowing that they'll lose their job for it. But they are willing because they care that much about their kids, and they know that we've reached that moment in history in our country where we don't have any time left. And that's what they're trying to say to their elected leaders is, do you have any idea what time it is in this country? Act accordingly, fight accordingly.
Well, let me tell you something. Gubernatorial candidate Terry McAuliffe. I didn't want to call him governor.
Hey, be careful.
I don't want him. We can't have him win in
He's
Virginia.
a former governor.
Former governor. He was asked about critical race theory, and his response was very interesting. Let's take a look.
So I, listen to what you're saying about education. I was just wondering, with all the Republicans are talking about critical race theory, and they're making this huge deal about it, and it's all the conversation in the news with Virginia. What are you going to say to all those people making education about that?
That's another right-wing conspiracy.
Okay.
This is totally made up by Donald Trump and Glenn Youngkin. This is who they are. It's a conspiracy theory.
Okay.
And you know what people want to know about? Why are we not paying our teachers? Why are we down 1,000 teachers today? Why?
So there you go. Terry McAuliffe basically saying, put the blame on Donald Trump, that it's a right-wing conspiracy theory. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, the left is in full-on meltdown right now because they know that the conservatives across the country, and not just conservatives, this is a incredible bipartisan coalition, are waking up to the fact that they're trying to bring a race-based society back to this country. Interesting is that that's not the approach that Barack Obama took. Barack Obama didn't say that this was just made up, that this is a conspiracy. He said it was a different set of priorities and made fun of conservatives, but he didn't dispute that it was real. He didn't dispute that this has been their governing strategy for any number of years. And so, we're not going to go away, and we're certainly not going to let a former governor tell us that we shouldn't be concerned about what is being taught in our schools and our government.
So we had this example where now even corporate America is taking they're hiring these left-wing consulting groups to, preach white guilt and white privilege, and making their executives basically apologize to their coworkers for the color of their skin. Do you get the sense when you were in government working for President Trump, he really tried to root this out of the military, tried to root this out of anybody who contracted with the federal government? Obviously, Biden has reversed those policies. Do you get the sense these companies are realizing that they are really close to the edge of completely alienating their employee base and their customers?
Somewhat. I mean, I think we've seen some of the corporations touch the fire and start to make some changes, but I don't think we're anywhere near getting their attention yet. I think we're going to have to continue to throw some public elbows, not unlike talking about the antitrust exemption with Major League Baseball. And when President Trump did his executive order, the number one pushback that we got was, in fact, the fact that we were trying to apply it to federal contractors. And they, to your point, Matt, they said, look, we can't do any diversity training that's not critical race theory, because that's the only place that we can go to get this kind of training are the CRT type organizations. And so that is a huge problem, and yet they have folks within their organization, their HR departments, that are pushing this nonstop. So we've got a lot of work to do on that front, and the only way that I think that we'll be successful is to not just depend on legislation, but to continue to say, look, we no longer as conservatives are going to just look the other way when you are the liberal shock troops for the Democrat Party serving as these corporate entities.
Now, while we have, I think, lost ground on the federal government part, we have made inroads in the states. We've seen Governor Ron DeSantis, now Governor Greg Abbott, basically sign into law banning teaching of critical race theory in public schools. What other states are you thinking will follow the same track as these two leaders in these great states?
Yeah, Idaho already has, Iowa has, Arkansas has signed a similar legislation into law. Arizona has it out of its Congress or out of its legislature. New Hampshire is very close. So we're seeing it every step of these things where there are Republican governors, they are making its way to the governor's desk. Tennessee, same situation, has already been signed into law. So tremendous amount of bubbling up legislative activity in all of these states. And I've never seen an outpouring of grassroots momentum on an issue like this in the 20 years that I've been a part of this.
I agree. And you know, because you've looked at the disgusting, toxic agenda that's within these training schedules, and it has really nothing to do just with race. They always say it's about race, but it's always about more than race. And some of these curricula I've looked at make you feel bad if you're a man because you might be pro-life and you're trying to, control a woman's reproductive organs. That's literally part of it. They make you feel bad if you're straight. There's something wrong with you. So it's not just about the question of having tolerance and defeating bigotry when it comes to racial animosity. It's all of this insane wokeism of the left that's a part of this. Have you encountered the same type of curriculum?
Yeah, we have, and you have to zoom out a little bit and remember that critical theory didn't just start in the last several decades, and it's not just about race. Critical theory is in every discipline. They have critical gender theory, and so it is a criticism of the current institutions in our government, and those criticisms are designed to cause and foster such distaste for those institutions that you pull them down. And then we see what we saw last year, where people are going, we're still seeing it in some cities, where people are going around tearing down their cities, lighting them on fire because they're so disgusted with what they believe is the problem when that's not our country. And we certainly see it in this. They have a whole theory called intersectionality of the way that the more of the minority groups that you can add together, you're higher on the scale. It's just totally un-American and something that we need to continue to fight.
Yeah, I think one of the most interesting, or I would say just inspiring moments was the mom who had escaped the Chinese government under Mao's regime and basically made that comparison of critical race theory being this division, this communism here in America. And I really thought that resonates so well, and that the American people need to wake up and could take back their schools, make sure we take back our country, because the last thing we need is to move farther to the left and allow these communist ideas to win here in the United States.
Yeah, for sure. I know you agree on this, Russ. We're passionate. Your wife is passionate on these issues. We're raising kids. It's really important that they understand tolerance and decency and respect. This is the opposite of all that. As we close our time with you, how bad can the Biden administration make all of this animosity with their power, especially through things like the budget?
They can do a lot. I mean, the Office of Management and Budget, most people don't realize it's not just budgets, it's all regulation. It's all of government execution. And so what the Biden administration has asked directed OMB to do is to make every decision it makes, do it through the prism of equity, which is code word for leveling. It's code word for the critical theories to be able to deal with disparities that exist and to not have equality under the law. And so they have an opportunity to do everything that the federal government does and to push it through this prism that we've been talking about. But I think that as we see this national momentum arise, that will be tremendous pushback that they have not counted for. I think they're worried about it. That's why they send out President Obama to try to tamp it down. They know that the tide is rising, and I think we've got to do everything we can to help the ships that are at sea.
I hope they keep sending out President Obama. I like it. There's going to be a big red wave, and he's a big part of the reason why there'll be a big red wave. Russ Vought, thank you for your service to our country. Thanks for all you do to help us at CPAC. Thanks for being on the show, and we'll be right back to CPAC Now, America Uncanceled.
Okay, Schlapp, so last night was the big congressional ratings event here in Washington, D.C. You were there. This is awarding members for their conservative voting records. Tell us about it.
It's great. We had like 100 members there. We had senators, we had congressmen, and it was a really enjoyable event. I think everybody appreciates being together. We had CPAC supporters who were there as well. You know, remember, Republicans have been having to go through metal detectors to pass through a wall to even vote in the chamber.
At least they're showing up to work. I mean, I don't think the Democrats.
And the Democrats don't show up to work. They have proxy voting. It's really an insane thing.
Right.
The wall is down finally, but it's really been a hard time for these members, and we love our champions.
They really are amazing. One of my favorite photos was from Congressman Steve Scalise. He had his hands up in the air with his big award.
Yeah, and people forget this. Remember, he was a victim of this assassination attempt that happened to Republican members of the congressional baseball game. You know, it's amazing how when these hateful things happen to Republicans, they just kind of don't get talked about, right?
Right.
But all they want to talk about is January 6th. But this happened on a ball field actually not far from where we're working, and Steve Scalise came where we live. Yeah, Steve Scalise came into the event without aid of crutches or a walker and walked right over, got his award. And I love the photo because he doesn't have to rest on anything. He's got his photo in the air. He's a hero as a human being, a great friend, and also what a great member of Congress.
Well, you give gold and silver awards.
That's right.
Medals, I'd say. So it's like the Olympics, right? It's the Olympics of ratings.
Ronald Reagan said that if you're with me 80%, you're my 80% friend, not my 20% enemy. And because Reagan and CPAC have such a closely associated history, we've borrowed his tagline, and that's how we decide how we're going to give awards. And look, every Republican member wants these awards. Many of them who don't get the award still ask if they could just kind of come over and say hi to us. Right. So we always tell them, if you're below 80%, that's not such a good score. But at least you could do is lead on a couple of issues.
Right.
So we always look for ways to try to work with these members. And here's what I take away more than anything last night is I can tell you, I'm not really a betting man as far as Vegas is concerned, but put your money on red. There's going to be a big election come next November if these trends continue, and these Republican members can feel it. And I think Nancy Pelosi knows it too. By the way, she did not get an award last night.
She's in the negative numbers. Negative.
Sorry,
numbers.
Negative Nancy. You don't get an award this year.
But you know what I think is great is that you can go to conservative.org. You can look at like the ratings of state legislators too.
Yep. 8,000 ratings.
It's a great website. You just type in their name or the state, and you're able to pull up who's voting with a conservative record and who is not. Also, you got a call last night from a very special man, former senator from Kansas, Bob Dole. How did that go?
Well, as you guys know, I'm a Kansan, and my family lives out there. My brothers and sisters, my mom. My mom was in the car when Bob Dole called, and you know he was our senator, and it meant a lot to her. He sounded great. He's vigorous. He's following everything that's going on in politics. We had a great conversation about it. He asked me how big I thought next year was going to be for the Republicans. I said, sir, it's like 1994. And he remembers that very well because that was a big wave that brought him in to be the majority leader in the Senate. And then he was our nominee for the Republican Party in 1996. Look, he's battling lung cancer. You know, that's not an easy thing. It's a painful thing. I get the sense that he's reaching out to people because he's proud of what he did as a great patriotic American. He's a member of the greatest generation. He went over to Europe to fight fascism, and now he has to listen to the fact that he's a fascist, and the rest of us are fascists too. And you know, we did spend time talking about how sad it is where we are as a country, and he reminisced about there was a time when there were Republicans and Democrats, but they didn't have this desire to destroy each other personally. They wanted to destroy each other politically, but not personally. And of course, all that's changed. And we got to get back to a better place, but it's only going to get to a better place when the Democratic Party rids itself of this cancer of Marxism and socialism.
Amen, sweetheart. Amen.
So God bless you, Bob Dole. We're praying for you. You're a great American, and you made this Kansan very proud last night.
But you know, you went on Twitter, as you do several times.
You want me to start sending some tweets?
No, honey, just give me a second.
Oh, okay.
But apparently you and Tom Nichols. Tom Nichols is the Atlantic writer.
I actually don't know who Tom Nichols is. I don't think anybody knows who Tom Nichols is.
Well, he knows who you are, obviously. So what happened? There's this big thread on Twitter. If you haven't seen it, go to @mschlapp. It's kind of a fascinating exchange.
I don't know what it is.
Let me just give you a sneak preview here. So Tom Nichols goes after Matt and several other conservatives. There are fine conservatives who write for The Atlantic, Matt, and more than a few who likes cats. I guess people like cats, right?
You need your glasses.
Sorry. But what genuine conservatives do not do, is support sedition on behalf of a sociopathic, what is that?
I don't know. It's one of those Atlantic words.
Oh, Lord. Who wants to shred the Constitution? To your reply, you are like the adults in a Charlie Brown show. I know you are there, but it's just not relevant. You helped bring us a socialist president with your twisted hate for 75 million Americans. Bravo. That's just a little piece of the thread. You need to read the whole thing. What happened?
And then the Lincoln Project comes after me with Reed Galen, who was a colleague of mine. I used to always think we were friends, but he sends the nastiest tweets. And what I'd like Reed to understand is that when they talk about the Lincoln Project, I think they're talking about Lincoln Chafee, because Abraham Lincoln, that guy's with us. And when they're trying to rip down those statues of Abraham Lincoln, it's all of us on this side that are trying to say, no, he's a great man of history. I don't know what is wrong with these people who think they're Republican or conservative, where they want to rip down everybody who's actually trying to defend America. But I say, bring it on. All you're doing is giving me more Twitter followers. And I sleep really restfully at night.
Or they take away your Twitter followers, depending on the day.
But they do that after you gain them.
That's true.
So it's good. It makes you feel good. You got to earn them twice or three times.
We also had the conversation about Chrissy Teigen. She's an actress, model. I don't even know what she does.
There's something wrong. There's something wrong with her. She was the one. First of all, she's mean, and second of all, she's kind of like been very strange about some of her tweets about children.
Yeah, she bullies like these young teenagers. She allegedly told the designer, "People like you deserve to suffer and die." I tweeted out, "What is wrong with her? What is wrong with her? Being the celebrity and
I know what's wrong with her.
What is wrong with her?
Isn't she married to that terrible person, John Legend?
Yeah.
That's what's wrong with her. John Legend, who also is someone that likes to take to Twitter to really go after people he politically disagrees with.
But you know what?
Hey, guess what?
The hypocrisy of the left, though, is the fact that when it's a leftist, like a left celebrity, they barely criticize her. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's right.
It's outrageous.
No. Here's the deal for Hollywood. Oh, I sounded like Biden. For Hollywood and for people involved in music and sports, go back to uniting the country by just being good at that one little thing that you're good at. Because you're not good at all this other stuff, and we don't give a crap about what your views are.
No clue.
Just sing the song, play the game, act in the movie. We'll pay the outrageously expensive ticket prices, but when you get into all this criticizing 75 million Americans, not so much. And you know what? We'll be talking about this at CPAC, Texas. July 9th through the 11th. Make sure you go on our website at conservative.org, get your tickets. You can watch past episodes of CPAC Now, American UnCanceled. You can watch past episodes of The Bill Walton Show. We got a lot more information coming at you digitally in the future. Mercy's got her big brain working on all kinds of interesting programming, and Regina too, for you in the future. And we're going to be really excited to be with all of our friends in Texas. We love it when you tune into the show. We love the guests we had on, especially our board member, KT McFarland, who will be with us in Dallas, and all your favorite people will be there, including another great board member, Gordon Chang. We got to get Gordon on. We got to figure out what's going on in Hong Kong. It's really heavy on people's minds.
Absolutely.
What's going on with all these great freedom fighters like Jimmy Lai who have been arrested. So you guys, the world's in some turmoil, but we're staying right here at the center of the storm. We're going to keep coming at you 3 days a week, and thanks for joining us, and have a great day.